Hey everyone, welcome to Midnight Mystic Stories. I noticed a lot of you who are watching and enjoying the content aren't subscribed yet. If you love spine-chilling stories, creepy encounters, and unexplained mysteries, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow and helps us keep bringing more of the content you love. And be sure to comment below where you are tuning in from. Thank you and enjoy the video. You know how everyone says dating apps are a cesspool? Yeah, well, I didn't believe them. I thought, hey, I'm a normal dude, looking for a normal girl. What could possibly go wrong? Famous last words, right? This is the story of how I learned that sometimes the internet is way darker than you think. It all started, like most terrible decisions, on a Friday night. I was bored, scrolling through Tinder, swiping left on the usual suspects when I saw her profile. Her name was Clara, and she was different. Not in a weird, I collect porcelain dolls kind of way, but in an intriguing, almost ethereal way. Her pictures were all artsy, black and white shots of her in vintage dresses, posing in front of crumbling buildings, that sort of thing. She had this old Hollywood vibe, like she'd stepped straight out of a movie from the 40s. Her bio was even more cryptic. It just said, seeking someone to explore the forgotten corners with. I know, total red flag, but I was feeling adventurous. Plus, she was seriously gorgeous. I swiped right, fully expecting to be ghosted, but to my surprise, we matched instantly. We chatted for a few days, and she was just as mysterious and captivating as her profile suggested. She talked about old books, forgotten histories, and the beauty of decay. It was all a bit much, but I was drawn in by her unique perspective. We decided to meet up at this antique shop downtown, a place she said was filled with secrets. The shop was even creepier than I imagined. It was tucked away on a quiet side street, the windows dusty and filled with mannequins dressed in moth-eaten clothes. The air inside was thick with the smell of old paper and something else, something vaguely metallic that I couldn't quite place. Clara was already there, waiting for me near a towering stack of dusty books. She looked even more stunning in person, with her dark eyes and porcelain skin. She was wearing a long, velvet dress and a vintage hat that partially obscured her face. "I'm so glad you came," she said, her voice soft and melodic. "I have something I want to show you." She led me through the maze of antiques, past rows of creepy dolls and cabinets filled with strange artifacts. Finally, we stopped in front of a large, ornate mirror hanging on the back wall. "This," she said, her eyes gleaming, "is no ordinary mirror." I raised an eyebrow. "Okay, what makes it so special?" "It's a portal," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "A gateway to another time, another place." I laughed nervously. "Seriously? You're kidding, right?" She didn't laugh. Her face was deadly serious. "I wouldn't joke about something like this. I've been researching this mirror for years. It's been in my family for generations." She then told me a long story about how her ancestors were involved in some sort of occult society, and that the mirror was used to communicate with spirits from the past. I was starting to get seriously creeped out, but I didn't want to be rude, so I played along. "So, what? You're saying we can just step through this mirror and go back in time?" I asked, trying to keep the skepticism out of my voice. "Not exactly," she said. "It's more like a glimpse, a window into another world. But be warned," she added, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "It's not always a pleasant sight." She reached out and touched the mirror, and as she did, the air around us grew cold. The reflection in the mirror seemed to ripple, and for a moment, I thought I saw something move in the depths of the glass. "Are you sure about this?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "Positive," she said, her eyes fixed on the mirror. "Are you ready to see the other side?" Before I could answer, she grabbed my hand and pulled me closer to the mirror. As our faces neared the glass, the reflection began to distort and swirl, and a strange, sickly sweet odor filled the air. Suddenly, I felt a sharp pain in my head, and my vision blurred. I stumbled backward, pulling my hand away from Clara's grasp. "What was that?" I asked, rubbing my temples. Clara didn't answer. She was staring at the mirror, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement. "It's working," she whispered. "It's actually working." The reflection in the mirror was no longer a reflection of the room. Instead, it showed a dark, twisted landscape, filled with gnarled trees and shadowy figures lurking in the distance. The air seemed to vibrate with an unnatural energy, and I could feel a palpable sense of dread emanating from the glass. I tried to pull Clara away from the mirror, but she wouldn't budge. She was completely transfixed, her eyes glued to the horrifying scene unfolding before us. "Clara, we need to get out of here," I said, my voice shaking. "This isn't right." She didn't hear me. She was too busy staring into the abyss. Suddenly, one of the shadowy figures in the mirror turned its head and looked directly at us. Its eyes were black and empty, and its face was contorted into a grotesque grin. A wave of pure terror washed over me, and I knew, with a chilling certainty, that whatever was on the other side of that mirror was not something we wanted to encounter. I grabbed Clara by the arm and dragged her away from the mirror. She resisted at first, but I was stronger than her, and I managed to pull her towards the entrance of the shop. As we stumbled out into the street, the image in the mirror shattered, and the air returned to normal. Clara collapsed against me, sobbing uncontrollably. "What did we just see?" she cried, her voice choked with fear. I didn't know what we had seen, but I knew I never wanted to see it again. I took Clara home, and she seemed to calm down a bit. She apologized for scaring me and promised that she would never mess with the mirror again. But the damage was done. I couldn't shake the feeling that we had opened a door to something dark and sinister, something that should have been left undisturbed. I blocked her number and deleted Tinder that night. I never went back to that antique shop, and I tried to forget the whole thing ever happened. For a while, I thought I had succeeded. But then, a few weeks later, I started having nightmares. I would dream of that twisted landscape and those empty black eyes staring back at me from the mirror. And sometimes, when I look in the mirror, I think I see something else in the reflection, something lurking just behind my own image. I don't know if Clara ever found what she was looking for in those forgotten corners, but I know I definitely didn't. Now, I just stick to meeting people in real life. Coffee shops are way less likely to contain interdimensional portals, you know? I'm not usually one to share stuff like this, mostly because I'm low-key embarrassed about it. But my best friend, Chloe, keeps telling me I need to get it off my chest, that maybe talking about it will help me. I don't know. Process it or something. Plus, she thinks it would make a killer story for her podcast. I'm still on the fence about that, but fine. Here's the story. It all started with a swipe right, obviously. It was like the dead of winter, January to be exact. I was bored out of my mind, stuck inside because of the ridiculous snowstorms we were having. I'd already binged everything on Netflix, and even reorganizing my closet felt like a monumental task. So, naturally, I did what any self-respecting, terminally bored 20-something would do. I downloaded Tinder. I'd been on dating apps before, with the usual mix of awkward conversations, ghosting, and the occasional decent date that never went anywhere. Nothing earth-shattering, just a typical dating app grind. But this time felt different. Maybe it was the winter blues. Maybe I was just desperate for some kind of human connection, but I was determined to actually put myself out there. That's when I saw his profile. His name was Ethan, and his pictures were intriguing. He wasn't your typical gym selfie dude. He had this kind of artistic, brooding vibe going on. Think dark hair, intense eyes, and a jawline that could cut glass. His profile said he was a photographer, which I thought was cool. I'm a graphic designer, so I figured we'd have something in common. We matched almost instantly, and he messaged me right away. The conversation flowed really easily. We talked about everything: movies, music, our families, our dream travel destinations. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, and I was definitely feeling the same way. After a few days of nonstop texting, he suggested we meet up. He proposed this quirky little cafe downtown, the kind of place with exposed brick walls and mismatched furniture. I was excited but also, a little nervous. It had been a while since I'd felt this way about someone I'd only met online. The day of the date, I spent way too long trying to decide what to wear. I finally settled on a comfortable sweater and jeans, figuring I wanted to look cute but also relaxed. When I walked into the cafe, Ethan was already there, sitting at a table near the window. He looked even better in person. Seriously, his eyes were like something out of a movie. The date started off great. We talked for hours, laughing and joking like we'd known each other forever. He told me about his photography work, showed me some of his pictures on his phone. They were really good, like professional level good. I told him about my design projects, and he seemed genuinely impressed. As the evening went on, the conversation took a slightly darker turn. He started talking about his fascination with abandoned places, with capturing the beauty in decay. He showed me some photos he'd taken in an old, abandoned asylum outside of town. The pictures were definitely creepy, but also kind of captivating. He seemed almost obsessed with this place. He described it in vivid detail, talking about the peeling paint, the rusted metal, the echoes of the past. He said he felt a connection to the asylum, like it was calling to him. I tried to steer the conversation back to lighter topics, but he kept bringing it back to the asylum. He wanted to know if I was interested in photography too, and if I'd ever been to any abandoned places. I told him I wasn't really into that kind of thing, but he seemed disappointed. The date ended on a slightly awkward note. He walked me back to my car, and we said goodbye. He texted me later that night, saying he had a great time and wanted to see me again. I told him I had a good time too, but I wasn't sure how I felt about a second date. Over the next few weeks, he kept texting me, trying to convince me to go out with him again. I kept making excuses, saying I was busy with work or had other plans. Honestly, I was just creeped out by his obsession with the asylum. It felt a little too intense for me. Then, one night, he texted me with a different kind of proposition. He said he was planning a photography shoot at the abandoned asylum, and he wanted me to come with him. He said it would be a chance for me to see his work in action, and maybe even inspire me with my own art. I immediately said no. There was no way I was going to some creepy, abandoned asylum in the middle of nowhere with a guy I barely knew. But he was persistent. He kept texting me, begging me to reconsider. He said he wouldn't pressure me to do anything I didn't want to do, that he just wanted to share his passion with me. After a few days of relentless texting, I finally caved. I told myself it was just one day, that I could handle it. Plus, part of me was still intrigued by him, by his artistic side. I know, stupid. The day of the shoot, he picked me up in his beat-up old truck. As we drove out of town, I started to feel a knot forming in my stomach. The sky was overcast, and the landscape was bleak and desolate. We drove for what seemed like hours, until we finally reached the asylum. It was even more terrifying in person. The building was massive and imposing, with broken windows and crumbling walls. The air was thick with the smell of decay and dampness. As we walked through the gates, I felt a wave of unease wash over me. Ethan seemed completely unfazed. He was practically giddy with excitement, pointing out different angles and lighting possibilities. He started setting up his equipment, completely ignoring my growing discomfort. As he was setting up, he told me to walk around and explore the building to try to get some inspirations. I wandered through the dark, echoing hallways, my heart pounding in my chest. I could almost feel the presence of the people who had been trapped within those walls. Suddenly, I heard a noise, a faint scratching sound coming from one of the rooms. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. I strained my ears, trying to figure out what it was. The scratching sound grew louder, more insistent. I took a tentative step towards the room, my hand trembling as I reached for the doorknob. I couldn't do it. I backed away slowly, my mind racing. I needed to get out of there, to get away from this place. I turned and ran, stumbling through the hallway, desperate to find Ethan. I found him in the main hall, still setting up his equipment. I ran towards him, breathless and panicked. "Ethan," I said, "we need to leave. Now. I don't feel good. Something is wrong." He looked at me. His eyes narrowed. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Did you see something?" I didn't want to tell him about the scratching sound, about the feeling of dread that had washed over me. I just wanted to get out of there. "I don't know," I said. "I just don't like this place. Please, let's just go." He hesitated for a moment, then sighed. "Fine," he said, "but we're coming back. This place is amazing." We packed up his equipment and left the asylum. As we drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible had almost happened. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I knew I had made a mistake by coming there. I never spoke to Ethan again. I blocked his number and deleted him from all my social media accounts. I still think about that day sometimes, about the abandoned asylum and the creepy guy I met on Tinder. It was a close call, and I'm grateful that I got out of there before things got any worse. I still have a hard time meeting with people from online, so I guess it really did some damage. Yeah, Chloe can use this for a podcast. You know how everyone tells you to stay away from Tinder? Yeah, I probably should have listened. Let me tell you, I thought I was being careful, but this whole thing spiraled so fast it's still messing with my head. It started out so normal, which is probably the scariest part. It was the summer after graduation, and I was stuck back in my hometown, working a dead-end job at the local grocery store. All my friends had moved on, going to different colleges or starting their careers, leaving me behind in this boring little town with nothing to do but bag groceries and scroll through TikTok. That's when I downloaded Tinder. I figured, why not? Maybe I could meet someone cool and escape the monotony. I wasn't expecting much, honestly. Small town, small dating pool, you know? But then I matched with him. His name was Alex, and his profile was pretty standard. A couple of pictures of him hiking, one with his dog, and a short bio saying he was into music and exploring new places. He seemed normal, maybe even a little bit interesting. We started chatting, and he was actually really easy to talk to. We had a lot in common, like our taste in music and our love for the outdoors. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, which was a nice change from the usual Tinder interactions. After a few days of texting, he suggested we meet up. I was hesitant at first. I mean, it's Tinder. You never really know who you're talking to. But he seemed so nice, and I was so bored that I decided to take a chance. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop in the next town over. It was a cute little place, and I figured if things got weird, I could always make a quick escape. When I saw him walk in, I was actually relieved. He looked exactly like his pictures. Tall, kind of scruffy, with a friendly smile. We ordered our coffees and started talking. He was even more charming in person. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. He told me about his job as a software developer, his family, his dreams of traveling the world. He was a great listener, and he made me feel comfortable and at ease. By the end of the date, I was completely smitten. I actually thought, wow, maybe this could be something real. He walked me back to my car, and we hugged goodbye. He texted me later that night, saying he had a great time and wanted to see me again. I was so excited. We went on a few more dates over the next couple of weeks. We went hiking, saw a movie, and even had a picnic in the park. Everything felt so natural and easy. I was starting to really fall for him. That's when things started to get weird. It started small. He would text me at odd hours of the night, asking what I was doing. He would get a little jealous if I mentioned hanging out with other friends. At first, I brushed it off as him just being really into me. But then it started escalating. He started showing up at my work unannounced. He would just stand there, watching me bag groceries, with this strange, intense look in his eyes. It made me feel uncomfortable, like I was being watched. I tried to tell him that I needed my space, but he would just laugh it off, saying he was just being affectionate. One night, he called me and asked if he could come over. I was tired and just wanted to relax, so I told him I wasn't feeling well. He seemed disappointed, but he said he understood. A few hours later, I heard a knock at my door. I looked through the window, and it was him. I didn't answer. He kept knocking, louder and louder, until I was terrified. I turned off all the lights and hid in my bedroom until he finally gave up and left. The next day, I confronted him about it. He apologized profusely, saying he had just wanted to see me and make sure I was okay. He promised it wouldn't happen again. I wanted to believe him, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was really wrong. I started avoiding him. I stopped answering his calls and texts. I made excuses whenever he asked to see me. He didn't take it well. He became more persistent, more demanding. He would bombard me with messages, calling me dozens of times a day. He would drive by my house slowly, staring at my windows. I felt like I was being stalked. I tried to tell my friends and family about what was happening, but they didn't understand. They thought I was overreacting. They said he was just really into me, and I should give him another chance. But I knew better. I knew that this wasn't normal. This wasn't healthy. One night, I was driving home from work when I noticed a car following me. It was Alex's car. He started tailgating me, flashing his headlights and honking his horn. I was terrified. I sped up, trying to get away from him, but he kept following me. I turned down a dark, deserted road, hoping he would lose me, but he stayed right behind me. I was driving as fast as I could, my heart pounding in my chest. Suddenly, he swerved his car into mine, forcing me off the road. My car crashed into a tree. I was dazed and disoriented. I could hear Alex's car pulling up behind me. I tried to get out of my car, but the door was jammed. I looked up and saw him walking towards me, his face contorted with rage. I don't remember exactly what happened next. It's all a blur. I remember him yelling at me, accusing me of leading him on. I remember him trying to drag me out of the car. I remember screaming and fighting for my life. Somehow, I managed to get away from him. I ran into the woods, stumbling through the darkness. I could hear him chasing after me, calling my name. I ran as fast as I could, my lungs burning, my legs aching. I eventually made it to a nearby house and called the police. They arrived a few minutes later and arrested Alex. I was taken to the hospital, where I was treated for minor injuries. Alex was charged with assault and stalking. He pleaded guilty and was sentenced to several years in prison. Even though he's behind bars, I still can't shake the feeling of being watched. I still have nightmares about that night. I'm constantly looking over my shoulder, afraid that he'll somehow find a way to get to me. I deleted Tinder after that. I'm not sure if I'll ever be able to trust anyone I meet online again. The whole thing was a nightmare, a complete and utter invasion of my life. Now I'm just trying to piece myself back together, trying to forget the horror I experienced. I still get anxious, but I'm trying to get better. I still get scared, but I'm trying to get stronger. And I tell you this story, not for pity, but as a warning. Be careful who you meet online. You never really know who they are, or what they're capable of. Protect yourself, trust your instincts, and don't be afraid to ask for help if you need it. It's better to be safe than sorry. Well, buckle up, because mine's a doozy. I'm talking full-blown. Delete the app and move to a remote island kind of crazy. And the worst part? It started so normal. I mean, terrifyingly normal. It was a Tuesday night. I was bored out of my skull, procrastinating on a mountain of college readings, and decided to reactivate my Tinder. Don't judge. We all do it. I swiped through the usual suspects, gym selfies, generic bios about loving adventure and dogs, and the occasional guy holding a fish. Why is that a thing? Then I saw him. His name was Ethan, and his profile was different. No cheesy quotes, no boasting, just a few candid photos. One was of him hiking in the mountains near where I live in Colorado. Another was of him sketching in what looked like a coffee shop. He had this kind of quiet intensity in his eyes, like he was observing everything, taking it all in. I'm a sucker for that artistic type. I swiped right. We matched instantly. Instant validation, am I right? He messaged me almost immediately, not with a lame pickup line, but with a genuine question about my major. We talked for hours that night, about books, movies, our families, our dreams. He was smart, funny, and actually seemed interested in what I had to say. Red flag number 1, looking back. Nobody that interesting is actually on Tinder. We decided to meet up a few days later. He suggested this little indie bookstore in a historic district of Denver. I was so excited. I actually spent like an hour picking out an outfit, which is so not me. I usually just throw on whatever's clean. The bookstore was exactly as charming as I pictured. Old brick walls, towering shelves crammed with books, and the smell of old paper and coffee hanging in the air. Ethan was already there when I arrived, standing by the poetry section. He looked even better in person. He had this disarming smile, and his eyes really did seem to sparkle. The date went great. We browsed the shelves, talked about our favorite authors, and ended up getting coffee at a cafe next door. He was attentive, engaging, and didn't pull any of those awkward, try-hard moves that guys sometimes do. I was actually starting to think, okay, maybe this is it. Maybe I finally found a decent guy on this hellscape of an app. That's when things started to get weird. It started subtly. He began texting me constantly, like all day, every day. At first, I didn't mind. I was into him, and it was nice to feel like someone was thinking about me. But then it became intense. If I didn't respond within a few minutes, he'd send another text, asking if I was okay. He started using pet names, like my love and sweetheart, which felt way too soon. I mean, we'd only been on one date. Then there were the questions. He wanted to know everything about me, my daily routine, my friends, my family. He remembered every detail I told him, even the insignificant stuff. It was flattering at first, but it quickly turned creepy. It felt like I was being interrogated, not courted. I tried to pull back a little. I started taking longer to respond to his texts, making excuses about being busy with school. But it didn't work. He just became more persistent, more anxious. He started showing up at places he knew I'd be. The library, my favorite coffee shop, even outside my classes. It was like he was always watching me. One evening, I was walking home from campus when I saw him standing across the street, leaning against a lamppost. It was dark, and his face was obscured by the shadows, but I knew it was him. He just stood there, staring at me. It sent a chill down my spine. I picked up my pace and practically ran the rest of the way home. I locked the door behind me and peeked through the curtains. He was still there, just standing there, watching. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I decided to confront him. I texted him and told him that I needed some space, that I wasn't comfortable with how intense things were moving. He responded almost immediately, saying he was sorry if he'd made me uncomfortable, that he just cared about me so much and didn't want to lose me. He promised to give me space. I wanted to believe him, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. I started avoiding places I knew he might be, taking different routes to school, and keeping my phone charged at all times. I even told my roommate what was going on, just in case. A week went by, and I didn't hear from him. I started to relax a little, thinking maybe he'd actually listen to me. Maybe he'd finally gotten the message. Then, one afternoon, I got a package in the mail. It was a small, wrapped in brown paper. There was no return address. I was hesitant to open it, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside, there was a journal. It was filled with handwritten entries, all about me. It detailed every aspect of my life, from my daily routine to my innermost thoughts and feelings. It was like he had been inside my head, watching my every move. I flipped through the pages, my heart pounding in my chest. Then I saw it. On the last page, there was a drawing. It was a sketch of me, standing in my bedroom, looking out the window. I ran to my window and looked out. Across the street, standing in the shadows, was Ethan. He was holding a pair of binoculars. I screamed and slammed the curtains shut. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, he was gone. They took a report, but said there wasn't much they could do without concrete evidence of a crime. I was terrified. I didn't feel safe in my own home. I spent the next few weeks staying with my parents, jumping at every shadow and sound. I eventually had to drop out of school for a semester. I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't sleep. I was constantly looking over my shoulder. The police eventually found Ethan. He had moved to another state and was working under a false name. They charged him with stalking and harassment. He's in jail now, awaiting trial. I'm still dealing with the aftermath of what happened. I have nightmares, I have trust issues, and I'm terrified of dating. I deleted all my dating apps, obviously. Sometimes I still see someone who resembles him, and my heart starts racing. The whole thing makes you question everything. Like, how could I have been so wrong about someone? How could I have let someone like that into my life? And most importantly, how could I have been so blind to the warning signs? I think about it all the time. I keep trying to piece it together, to figure out where I went wrong. But the truth is, there's no easy answer. Sometimes, people are just good at hiding their true nature. Sometimes, you just get unlucky. All I know is that I'll never be the same. And I'll definitely never swipe right again. Look, it's not like I'm cured from swiping apps entirely now. I just learned that people can be really good in hiding their craziness. Okay, so I gotta tell someone about this, because it's been messing with my head for like weeks. You know how you sometimes download Tinder when you're bored and maybe a little lonely? Yeah, that was me, scrolling through endless profiles of guys holding fish or flexing in gym mirrors. It was the usual garbage, but then I saw him. His profile was different. Just one picture, a grainy shot of him standing in what looked like a really old library, all dark wood and towering bookshelves. He wasn't smiling, just staring straight at the camera with these intense, almost unsettling eyes. His bio was even weirder. Interested in rare books and long walks in the woods. Okay, creepy much? But for some reason, I swiped right. I know. Bad decision right from the start. We matched. He messaged me almost immediately, which should have been another red flag. But I was bored, remember? He didn't say anything cheesy or try to be funny. Just good evening. Super formal. I replied something equally lame, and we started talking. He wasn't flirty or anything. Just asked me about what I liked to read, what my hobbies were, stuff like that. The conversation was oddly stilted, like he was choosing his words really carefully. He told me his name was Alistair, and that he lived in an old house just outside of town. He said he'd recently inherited it from his grandfather. He mentioned the house a lot, always talking about its history and the unique atmosphere. At first, I thought it was kinda cool, like he was all into architecture and old things. But then it started to feel off, like he was obsessed. He asked me if I wanted to come over sometime and see his library. He described it in such detail. Walls lined with ancient tomes, a reading room bathed in the soft glow of antique lamps, a fireplace that has warmed generations. It sounded like something out of a Gothic novel. I was hesitant, but curious. Plus, I was still bored. So stupidly, I said yes. We arranged for me to come over on a Saturday afternoon. He gave me really specific directions, saying that GPS wouldn't work properly in his area. He told me to look for a long, winding driveway hidden behind a grove of trees. Even his instructions felt like something out of a horror movie. The day arrived, and I felt a knot of anxiety in my stomach. I almost canceled, but my dumb curiosity got the better of me. I followed his directions, and eventually, I found the driveway. It was even creepier than he described, overgrown with weeds and shrouded in shadows. As I drove up the long, winding path, the house slowly came into view. It was huge, 3 stories tall, with dark stone walls and a steeply pitched roof. It looked like something out of a Victorian ghost story. The windows were small and dark, and the whole place just radiated an aura of neglect and decay. Alistair was waiting for me on the porch. He was taller than I expected, with pale skin, dark eyes, and slick-back black hair. He was wearing a dark suit that looked way too formal for a casual get-together. He didn't smile, just nodded curtly and ushered me inside. The inside of the house was even more unsettling than the outside. It was dimly lit, with heavy drapes covering the windows. The air was thick with the smell of dust and old paper. We walked through a long, echoing hallway, past rooms filled with antique furniture covered in white sheets. It felt like stepping back in time, or into a haunted museum. Finally, we reached the library. It was exactly as he had described it. A vast room filled with towering bookshelves that stretched to the ceiling. The air was heavy with the smell of old books, and the only light came from a few antique lamps scattered around the room. It was impressive, but also incredibly creepy. He showed me around, pointing out rare editions and first printings. He seemed to know everything about every book, reciting titles and authors from memory. He was clearly intelligent, but there was something unsettling about his intensity. He kept glancing at me with those piercing eyes, making me feel like I was being studied, not chatted up. After a while, he asked me if I wanted to see something really special. He led me to a hidden section of the library, behind a bookshelf that swung open like a secret door. Inside was a small, windowless room. In the center of the room was a single pedestal, and on the pedestal was a book. This book was different from all the others. It was bound in dark leather, with strange symbols embossed on the cover. It looked ancient, almost otherworldly. He told me it was a very rare and powerful book, passed down through his family for generations. He wouldn't tell me what was inside, only that it contained secrets beyond human comprehension. He opened the book, and a gust of cold air swept through the room. The symbols on the cover seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. He started to read aloud, in a language I didn't understand. His voice was low and monotone, but it echoed strangely in the small room. As he read, I started to feel dizzy and disoriented. The room seemed to spin, and the symbols on the book appeared to writhe and twist. I felt a growing sense of dread, a feeling that something terrible was about to happen. I told him to stop reading, but he ignored me. His eyes were glazed over, and he seemed to be in some kind of trance. I grabbed his arm, trying to pull him away from the book, but he didn't even flinch. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. I screamed, stumbling backward, trying to find my way out. I bumped into something cold and hard, and I realized it was one of the walls. Then I heard a noise, a low, guttural growl, coming from the corner of the room. It sounded like an animal, but something unnatural, something evil. I froze, paralyzed with fear. I couldn't see anything in the darkness, but I could feel something moving closer, something breathing heavily, something hungry. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen in terror. It felt like an eternity. Then the lights flickered back on. Alistair was standing in the center of the room, staring at me with a blank expression. The book was closed, and the pedestal was empty. He looked perfectly normal, as if nothing had happened. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice sounding distant. I didn't say anything. I just stared at him, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't get out of there fast enough. I turned and ran, stumbling through the library, down the hallway, and out the front door. I didn't stop running until I was back in my car, speeding away from that house. I never spoke to Alistair again. I blocked his number, deleted him from Tinder, and tried to forget the whole thing ever happened. But I couldn't. The memory of that house, that book, that growl in the darkness, it's all burned into my brain. I still have nightmares about it. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, convinced that something is watching me, lurking in the shadows. I can't shake the feeling that I narrowly escaped something terrible, something that I don't even understand. I try to find out more about Alistair and his family, but I couldn't find anything. It's like they don't exist. Maybe they don't. Maybe that whole house was just a figment of my imagination, a product of my boredom and loneliness. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt. And I know that I will never, ever use Tinder again. And I definitely won't be taking any long walks in the woods anytime soon. I was swiping one night, just killing time before my pizza arrived. I was in my dorm, procrastinating on a huge history paper, and Tinder seemed like a much better option than, actually studying. I came across her profile, Sarah. She was super cute blonde, with this kind of quirky smile that made you think she was in on some secret joke. Her bio was simple. Love hiking, coffee, and bad puns. I'm a sucker for bad puns, so I swiped right. And boom, instant match. We started chatting, and things were going really well. She seemed funny, smart, and genuinely interested in getting to know me. We talked about everything. Our favorite movies, our families, our dreams for the future. It was actually kind of refreshing, because most of my Tinder interactions usually fizzle out after a few lame pickup lines. After a few days of nonstop texting, we decided to meet up. She suggested this coffee shop downtown, The Daily Grind. I thought it was a pretty basic choice, but hey, coffee is coffee. I got there early, wanted to make a good impression. I ordered a latte and waited, and waited, and waited. Sarah was late, like really late. I texted her, but she didn't respond. I was starting to think I'd been catfished or something, when finally, she walked in. She looked different than her pictures, not in a bad way, just different. Her hair was darker, almost brown, and she was wearing this really old-fashioned dress, like something you'd see in a vintage store. But she still had that smile, so I figured maybe she just had a bad photo day or something. "Sorry I'm late," she said, her voice a little breathy. I got held up. "No worries," I said, trying to play it cool. "Traffic, right?" She just gave me a weird look and said, something like that. The date started off okay. We talked about the usual stuff, school, hobbies, blah, blah, blah. But the more we talked, the more I started to feel like something was off. Her stories didn't quite add up. She'd say things that didn't make sense, like referring to current events as if they happened a long time ago. For example, I was telling her about this protest that happened on campus last week, and she asked, "Oh, the one against the Duke? Those things never really work, do they?" I was confused. The Duke? What was she talking about? No, I said. It was about tuition hikes, and there's no Duke involved. She just stared at me for a second, then laughed it off. "Oh, right, she said. I get my decades mixed up sometimes." That was the first red flag, but I ignored it. I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she was just quirky. The second red flag came when we started talking about where we lived. I told her I was in a dorm on campus, and she said she lived in a house on the outskirts of town. I asked her where, and she told me a street name I'd never heard of. "That's weird," I said. "I've lived here my whole life, and I've never heard of that street." She just shrugged. "It's kind of hidden," she said. "You wouldn't know it unless you lived there." Okay, that was a little suspicious. But again, I brushed it off. Maybe it was a new development or something. But then, things started to get really weird. We decided to go for a walk after coffee. It was a nice evening, so we strolled through the park. As we were walking, I noticed she was staring at this old, abandoned building. It was this creepy-looking Victorian house, with boarded-up windows and overgrown weeds. "That's a cool house," I said, trying to make conversation. "I wonder what it used to be." She stopped walking and just stared at the house, her eyes wide. "That's where I used to live," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Wait, really?" I said, "But it's abandoned." She didn't say anything. She just kept staring at the house, her face pale. I tried to steer her away, but she wouldn't budge. She just stood there, frozen, her eyes fixated on the house. "Sarah, are you okay?" I asked, getting a little freaked out. She finally turned to me, her eyes filled with tears. "I have to go," she said, her voice trembling. "I can't be here." And then, she just ran. She took off running through the park, disappearing into the darkness. I stood there for a moment, completely stunned. What the hell just happened? I tried to call her, but she didn't answer. I texted her, but she didn't respond. I was starting to get seriously worried. I decided to walk over to the abandoned house. I know. It was a stupid idea, but I couldn't help myself. I had to know what was going on. I walked up to the house and peered through one of the boarded-up windows. It was dark inside, but I could see a few pieces of furniture covered in dust. It looked like someone had lived there a long time ago. As I was standing there, I heard a noise behind me. I turned around, and there she was. Sarah. But it wasn't the Sarah I had met at the coffee shop. This Sarah looked different. Her eyes were black, her face was gaunt, and she was wearing a long, white dress. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice raspy. "Sarah, what's going on?" I asked, my voice trembling. She didn't answer. She just stared at me, her eyes burning into my soul. And then, she started to float. I'm not kidding. She literally started to float off the ground. Her body rose into the air, her arms outstretched. I screamed. I don't even care who heard me. I just screamed and ran. I ran as fast as I could, not stopping until I got back to my dorm. I locked the door and barricaded it with my desk. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there, shaking, wondering what I had just seen. The next day, I did some research. I looked up the abandoned house, and I found out that it had been the site of a tragic event. A young woman had lived there in the late 1800s, and she had died under mysterious circumstances. Some people said she had been murdered. Others said she had committed suicide. And her name? Sarah. I deleted my Tinder account that day. I never wanted to see another dating app again. To this day, I still don't know what happened that night. Was it a dream? Was it a hallucination? Or was it something more sinister? All I know is that I met a girl on Tinder, and she turned out to be a ghost. And that's a story I'll never forget. Now I stick to meeting people in person, like at class, or something. Much safer, trust me. I still think about her sometimes, though. Wonder what her story really was. But I'm definitely not going back to find out. I thought I was smart enough to navigate the digital dating world without ending up on some true crime podcast. I was so wrong. This is the story of how I almost became someone's weird obsession, and honestly, just writing it down makes my hands sweat. It all started with a guy named Mark. He had this really goofy smile in his profile picture, like he was trying way too hard to be charming. Usually, that's a red flag for me, but something about his eyes seemed genuine. Plus, his bio was funny, a self-deprecating joke about his love for bad puns, and even worse pizza. I swiped right, figuring what the heck. I'd been single for way too long, and even if he was a little awkward, at least he seemed harmless. We matched pretty quickly, and the initial messages were totally normal. He asked about my job. I asked about his. He was a software developer. Super cliché, I know. And we bonded over our mutual hatred of reality TV. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, which was honestly refreshing. After a few days of chatting, he suggested we grab coffee. I hesitated for a second. Something about him still felt a little off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I decided to go for it anyway, telling myself I could always make up an excuse and leave if things got weird. We met at this cute little cafe downtown, the kind with mismatched chairs and overpriced pastries. He was even goofier in person than in his pictures, fidgeting with his hands and tripping over his words. But he was also sweet and attentive, pulling out my chair and making sure I had enough sugar for my latte. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing. He told me about his family, his dreams of traveling the world, and his weird obsession with collecting vintage board games. I even found myself laughing at his terrible puns, which I never thought I'd do. By the end of the date, I was actually kind of smitten. We went on a few more dates after that, exploring different restaurants and parks around the city. He always paid, even when I offered to split the bill, and he always walked me to my door, making sure I got inside safe. He seemed like the perfect gentleman, the kind of guy you could bring home to your mom. And that's when things started to get strange. It started small. He would text me good morning every day, even on weekends when I liked to sleep in. He would leave little gifts on my doorstep, like my favorite candy or a handwritten note with a corny poem. At first, I thought it was cute, a sign that he really cared. But then it started to feel suffocating. He started showing up at places I hadn't told him I was going to be. I'd be at the grocery store, and he'd magically appear in the produce aisle, claiming he was just in the neighborhood. I'd be at the gym, and he'd be on the treadmill next to me, even though he'd never mentioned working out before. It was like he was following me, but in a subtle, almost innocent way. One night, I was having dinner with my girlfriends at this Italian place across town. I hadn't told Mark about it, because I wanted a night out with just the girls. But as we were leaving, I saw him standing across the street, watching us. He didn't wave or try to approach me. He just stood there, his face hidden in the shadows. I felt a cold rush of fear, a primal instinct that something was very, very wrong. I started avoiding his calls and texts, making up excuses about being busy with work or family. But he wouldn't take the hint. He kept showing up, kept leaving gifts, kept trying to insert himself into my life. I felt like I was being stalked, but I had no proof. He hadn't done anything overtly threatening. Nothing I could report to the police. He was just always there. Then one night, I came home from work to find my apartment door unlocked. My heart leaped into my throat. I slowly pushed the door open, my hands shaking. The apartment was dark and silent. I flicked on the light, and that's when I saw it. On my kitchen table, arranged in a perfect circle, were pictures of me. Pictures taken from my social media, pictures from our dates, and pictures taken without my knowledge. Pictures of me walking to work, pictures of me at the gym, pictures of me having dinner with my friends. And in the center of the circle, a single red rose. I screamed, a high-pitched, guttural sound that echoed through the apartment. I stumbled back, my legs weak and shaky. I didn't know what to do, who to call. I felt violated, exposed, like my entire life had been invaded. I ran out of the apartment and didn't stop running until I reached my best friend's house. I spent the night there, curled up on her couch, too afraid to go back to my own place. The next morning, we went to the police and filed a report. They took it seriously, but they said there wasn't much they could do until Mark actually did something to harm me. I ended up moving out of my apartment and getting a restraining order against him. It was a long and terrifying process, filled with anxiety and paranoia. I changed my phone number, deleted my social media accounts, and started carrying pepper spray everywhere I went. I felt like I was living in a horror movie, constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for him to reappear. I never saw Mark again, but the fear he instilled in me lingers to this day. I'm more cautious now, more aware of my surroundings. I'm more careful about who I trust, both online and in real life. And I definitely think twice before swiping right on Tinder. That goofy smile. Yeah, now I see it for what it really was. A mask hiding something dark and twisted underneath. Okay, so, listen up because this is a story I still can't believe happened to me. Seriously, I swear I'm not making any of this up. You know how you're scrolling through Tinder, right? Just swiping left, 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 occasionally, right, when someone looks vaguely interesting or, let's be real, when you're bored and desperate. Yeah, well, that's where my nightmare started. A bored swipe. Never thought a stupid dating app would lead to me needing therapy, but hey, life throws curveballs, right? It was a Sunday night. I was at my parents' place, supposed to be studying for this huge bio exam, but instead, I was procrastinating like a pro. That's when I saw him. Liam, his profile said. Dark hair, brooding eyes, the whole mysterious artist vibe going on. His bio was short, something about seeking inspiration in the mundane. Corny, I know, but something about him intrigued me. So, against my better judgment, I swiped right, and he swiped right back. Instant match. My stomach did this weird little flip-flop thing. We started chatting, and surprisingly, he was actually pretty cool. Not your typical, hey, wanna hook up kind of guy. We talked about movies, music, books, the usual stuff. He mentioned he was a painter, which explained the artist vibe. He lived in this old house in the woods, said it was really isolated, perfect for getting creative. Red flag number 1, maybe? But I ignored it. I was too caught up in the whole fantasy of dating a tortured artist. After a week of talking online, he suggested we meet up. He wanted to take me to see this secret spot he knew, a hidden waterfall deep in the forest near his place. Again, alarm bells should have been ringing, but I was young and dumb and thought it sounded romantic. My friends tried to talk me out of it. Meeting a guy from Tinder in the middle of nowhere? Are you crazy? They said. I told them I could handle myself, that I'd text them my location and check in every hour. Famous last words. The day of the date, I drove out to his place. It was even more secluded than I imagined. Miles of winding roads through dense woods, no cell service. When I finally arrived, his house was creepy. A huge, Victorian-era mansion that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. Paint peeling, windows boarded up, overgrown weeds everywhere. It looked like something straight out of a horror movie. Liam greeted me at the door, smiling like nothing was wrong. He looked different in person, less polished than his photos. His eyes seemed intense. Hey, he said, his voice a little too soft. Glad you could make it. We started walking towards the waterfall. The path was narrow and overgrown, barely visible. The woods were eerily silent, no birds chirping, no wind rustling through the trees. Just us and the crunch of leaves under our feet. I started to get this uneasy feeling, like I was being watched. As we got deeper into the woods, the atmosphere got heavier. The air felt thick and damp, and the sunlight couldn't penetrate the dense canopy. I kept glancing over my shoulder, convinced someone was following us. Liam didn't seem to notice anything. He just kept talking about his art, his voice a monotone drone. We finally reached the waterfall. It was beautiful, I'll give him that. A cascade of water tumbling down a moss-covered cliff into a crystal-clear pool. But even its beauty couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled over me. Liam sat down on a rock near the pool and gestured for me to join him. I hesitated, but I didn't want to seem rude. I sat down, keeping a safe distance between us. He started talking about his latest painting, a portrait of a woman he claimed to have seen in the woods. He described her in vivid detail, her long black hair, her pale skin, her eyes that seemed to pierce right through you. Then he turned to me and smiled. You know, he said, you remind me of her. My blood ran cold. I stood up, ready to bolt. I think I should go, I said, my voice trembling. He grabbed my arm. Don't leave, he said, his grip tightening. I want to show you something. He pulled me towards a small cave behind the waterfall. I resisted, but he was stronger than I thought. He dragged me inside. The cave was dark and damp, and the air smelled like mildew and decay. And then I saw them. Skulls. Human skulls. Arranged in a circle around a makeshift altar. Bones scattered across the floor. My stomach lurched, and I almost threw up. What is this? I whispered, my voice barely audible. Liam's eyes gleamed in the dim light. My inspiration, he said. These women, they inspire me. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a knife. A hunting knife with a long, sharp blade. He ran his thumb along the edge, his eyes fixed on me. Now, he said, his voice a low growl. It's your turn. I screamed. I fought him, kicking and scratching. I managed to break free and run out of the cave, back towards the path. He was right behind me, his footsteps pounding on the ground. I ran as fast as I could, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to get away from him. I stumbled and fell, scraping my knees and elbows. But I got back up and kept running. I eventually made it back to the road, where I flagged down a passing car. The driver, a kindly old woman, took one look at me and knew something was wrong. She drove me to the nearest police station, where I told them everything. The police searched Liam's house and the surrounding woods. They found the cave, the skulls, the bones. They found his paintings, portraits of the women he had killed. They arrested him, and he's now in prison, where he belongs. I'm still dealing with the trauma of what happened. I have nightmares, flashbacks. I can't go into the woods without feeling terrified. I deleted Tinder, obviously. I'm seeing a therapist, trying to process everything. Sometimes, I think about what would have happened if I hadn't run, if I hadn't been able to escape. It's a thought that haunts me every day. So yeah, that's my Tinder horror story. A cautionary tale about the dangers of online dating and the importance of trusting your gut. And maybe, just maybe, a reason to stick to studying bio. It's about this time I was scrolling through Tinder, bored out of my skull, and I swipe right on this guy. Big mistake. Huge. I'm usually pretty good at spotting weirdos, but this dude, he had me completely fooled. He was like a master of disguise, but instead of changing faces, he was changing personalities. His profile was normal enough. Liam, it said. A few pics of him hiking, one of him playing guitar, okay, maybe a little cliche, but whatever. And a bio that said he was looking for someone to explore the city with. Seemed harmless, right? I thought so too. We matched, and he messaged me almost immediately. We chatted for a few days, and he seemed genuinely cool. He was funny, asked me about myself, and actually listened. We had a lot in common, like our love for old movies and our mutual dislike of pineapple on pizza. A true test of character, if you ask me. So, naturally, I agreed to meet him. We decided to go to this little hole-in-the-wall diner downtown. It was one of those places that's been around forever, with red vinyl booths and a jukebox in the corner. I thought it would be a chill, low-pressure kind of vibe. And at first it was. Liam was even better in person. He was taller than I expected, with these piercing blue eyes and a smile that could melt glaciers. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. He told me about his job as a software developer, his dreams of traveling the world, and his goofy dog, Max. I was actually starting to think, wow, maybe I actually found a decent guy on Tinder. That's when things started to get weird. It started subtly. He kept staring at me, not in a flirty way, but in a way that made me feel like I was under a microscope, like he was analyzing every move I made, every word I said. Then, he started asking really personal questions. Questions that you don't usually ask someone you just met. Like, what's your biggest fear? And what's the darkest secret you've ever kept? I brushed it off, thinking he was just trying to get to know me better, but it still felt off. The conversation took a turn when he started talking about his family. He said he was really close to his mom and his sister. Normal enough, right? But then he started talking about how they were special and how they had a unique bond. He wouldn't elaborate, but he kept hinting that there was something different about them. He got this weird gleam in his eyes when he spoke about it, and it made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Then, he excused himself to go to the bathroom. I was relieved to have a moment to myself. I needed to process everything that had just happened. I pulled out my phone and texted my best friend, Sarah. "This guy is kind of creeping me out. I think I want to leave." She texted back instantly. "Just be careful. Text me when you get home." When Liam came back, he was different. He was even more intense than before. He leaned in close and said, "I have something to tell you. Something you need to know." My heart started pounding. I had a bad feeling about this. He went on to tell me that his family had a gift. He said they could see things that other people can't see. He started talking about auras and energy fields and all this other new age stuff that I definitely wasn't buying. He claimed that he could see my aura and that it was very bright and very special. He said that he and his family had been searching for someone like me for a long time. At this point, I was completely freaked out. I knew I had to get out of there. I made up some excuse about having to be home early, and I told him I had a family emergency. He didn't seem to believe me, but he didn't try to stop me either. He just stared at me with those piercing blue eyes and said, "We'll be in touch." I practically ran out of the diner. I didn't feel safe until I was back in my apartment, with the door locked and the curtains drawn. I blocked Liam's number and deleted him from Tinder. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. A few days later, I started getting weird phone calls. The caller ID was always blocked, and when I answered, there was just silence on the other end. I assumed it was just a telemarketer or something, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was Liam. Then, I started seeing him everywhere. I'd be walking down the street, and I'd catch a glimpse of him in the crowd. Or I'd be driving home from work, and I'd see his car behind me. I couldn't be sure it was him, but it always felt like he was watching me. I tried to tell myself that I was just being paranoid, that I was imagining things, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed, that Liam and his special family were after me. One night, I was home alone, watching TV. I heard a noise outside my window. I ignored it at first, thinking it was just the wind, but then I heard it again, a tapping sound, like someone was knocking on the glass. I went to the window and peeked through the curtains. I didn't see anything. I told myself it was just my imagination and went back to the couch. But then I heard the tapping again, louder this time. I was terrified, but I knew I had to see what was going on. I grabbed a baseball bat from the closet and slowly walked back to the window. I took a deep breath and yanked the curtains open. Liam was standing there. He was wearing a dark coat and a hat, and he had this creepy smile on his face. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, staring at me. I screamed and slammed the window shut. I locked all the doors and windows and called the police. They came and searched the area, but they couldn't find him. They said there was nothing they could do unless he actually did something. I spent the rest of the night huddled in my apartment, terrified that he would come back. I barely slept. Every little noise made me jump. The next day, I went to the police station and filed a restraining order against Liam. I also told them everything that had happened. They took me seriously this time, but they still couldn't guarantee my safety. I decided to move. I packed up all my stuff and moved to a different city. I changed my phone number and deleted all my social media accounts. I wanted to disappear. I needed to get away from Liam and his family. It's been a few years since that happened, and I haven't seen or heard from Liam since. But I still think about him sometimes. I still have nightmares about him standing outside my window, staring at me. I'll never forget that experience. It taught me a valuable lesson about trusting my instincts, and it made me realize that sometimes the people you meet online are not who they seem to be. Tinder is a jungle, and I'm never going back. Now I'm fine. It took a while to get used to it. I even sought for therapy. It's been a really scary adventure, and I don't think I will ever be the same. I learned that the hard way. This wasn't some, "Oh, he wasn't as cute in person," kind of disappointment. This was full on, lock your doors and never leave the house again, terrifying. I genuinely thought I was going to die. It all started during summer break after my first year of college. I was bored out of my mind, working a dead-end job at the local grocery store, bagging groceries for grumpy old ladies. My friends were all traveling or interning somewhere cool, and I was stuck in my suburban hometown, surrounded by cornfields and boredom. So naturally, I downloaded Tinder. What else was I going to do? Actually read a book. I wasn't looking for anything serious, just someone to hang out with, maybe go to the movies. You know, normal summer fling stuff. I swiped through a bunch of profiles, the gym bros flexing in their bathroom mirrors, the guys holding fish they caught. Why is that always a thing? The ones who clearly hadn't updated their photos since high school. Then I saw him. His name was Alex, and his profile was different. He wasn't conventionally attractive, but he had this intense look in his eyes that was kinda captivating. He had a few pictures of himself hiking in the mountains, which I thought was cool because I love being outdoors. His bio was short and sweet. Looking for someone to explore with. Seemed harmless enough, right? We matched, and he messaged me almost immediately. He was surprisingly witty and engaging over text. We talked about everything, our favorite movies, our dreams for the future, even our deepest fears. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, which was a nice change of pace from the usual Tinder small talk. After a few days of texting, he suggested we meet up. He said he knew this awesome hiking trail just outside of town, one that wasn't super popular with tourists. He described this hidden waterfall that you could swim in, and it sounded like the perfect escape from my boring summer routine. Against my better judgment, I said yes. The day of the hike, I was a nervous wreck. I spent way too long trying to pick out the perfect outfit. Not too try-hard, but not too sloppy. I finally settled on a pair of hiking shorts, a t-shirt, and my trusty hiking boots. I told my best friend, Sarah, where I was going and who I was meeting, just in case. She gave me the be careful speech, which I mostly ignored because, come on, it was just a hike. Alex picked me up in his beat-up Jeep. He was wearing a flannel shirt and jeans, and he looked even more intense in person. He smiled, and for a brief moment, I felt a little less nervous. The drive to the trailhead was quiet. Alex didn't say much, which I attributed to pre-hike jitters. When we arrived, the parking lot was empty, which should have been my first red flag. It was a beautiful day, perfect for hiking, yet there wasn't a single other car in sight. The trail started out innocently enough, winding through a dense forest. The air was fresh and clean, and the sounds of birds chirping filled the air. We talked a bit as we walked, mostly about nature and the surrounding scenery. Alex seemed knowledgeable about the local flora and fauna, which I found impressive. After about an hour, the trail started to get steeper and more challenging. The trees grew thicker, and the sunlight barely filtered through the canopy. I started to feel a little uneasy. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of our footsteps and the occasional rustle in the underbrush. I asked Alex how much further it was to the waterfall, and he just smiled mysteriously and said, "Almost there." That's when things started to get weird. He started acting different. He became quieter, more withdrawn. He kept glancing around, as if he was expecting someone or something to jump out of the woods. His eyes darted back and forth, and he had this strange, almost manic energy about him. Then, he started telling me stories. Dark stories. Stories about people getting lost in the woods, never to be seen again. Stories about wild animals attacking unsuspecting hikers. Stories about rituals. He claimed that this area used to be a sacred place for some ancient tribe, and that they would perform sacrifices. He said that the land was still tainted by their dark energy. I tried to laugh it off, but his voice was so serious, so intense, that I couldn't shake the feeling that he was telling the truth. I started to feel genuinely scared. I wanted to turn around, to go back to the safety of the parking lot, but I was afraid of what Alex might do if I tried to leave. We continued walking, deeper and deeper into the woods. The trail became overgrown and barely visible. I stumbled over roots and rocks, my heart pounding in my chest. Finally, we reached a clearing, and there it was, the waterfall. It was even more beautiful than I had imagined. The water cascaded down a rocky cliff into a crystal-clear pool below, but I couldn't appreciate its beauty. I was too busy trying to figure out how to get out of this situation alive. Alex walked to the edge of the pool and took off his shirt. He turned to me, his eyes gleaming with a strange, unsettling light. "Want to go for a swim?" he asked, his voice low and husky. I shook my head, My throat's suddenly dry. No, I think I want to go back now. He didn't say anything. He just stared at me, his expression unreadable. Then, he slowly started walking towards me. I backed away, my hand shaking. Alex, please. I don't feel comfortable here. Let's just go. He kept walking. I turned and ran. I ran as fast as I could, back the way we had come. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to get away from him. I could hear him behind me, his footsteps pounding on the ground. I didn't dare look back. I just kept running, my lungs burning, my legs aching. I eventually stumbled back onto the main trail and ran towards the parking lot. I didn't stop until I saw his Jeep in the distance. I ran past it, not wanting to risk encountering him again. I ran all the way back to town, to the nearest gas station, where I collapsed, gasping for breath. I called Sarah, who immediately came and picked me up. I told her everything that had happened, and she was horrified. We went straight to the police station and filed a report. The police investigated, but they couldn't find Alex. His Jeep was still in the parking lot, but he was nowhere to be seen. They searched the hiking trail, but they found nothing. It was like he had vanished into thin air. I never found out who Alex really was or what he wanted from me. All I know is that he scared me more than I've ever been scared in my entire life. I deleted Tinder that day, and I haven't been on a dating app since. I still have nightmares about that hike, about the dark woods and the intense look in Alex's eyes. To this day, I avoid hiking alone. If I do go hiking, I always go with a group of friends, and I make sure to stay on well-traveled trails. I also carry pepper spray, just in case. I learned a valuable lesson that day. Not everyone on Tinder is who they seem to be. And sometimes, the most innocent-looking profiles can hide the darkest secrets. I still think about Alex sometimes, wondering where he is and what he's doing. I hope he hasn't hurt anyone else. I hope he's not still out there, luring unsuspecting girls into the woods. I just want to forget it ever happened. Have you ever heard the saying, Tinder is a dumpster fire? Yeah, well, I officially have a story that proves it, but like a really bad one. One that makes you want to delete the app and swear off dating forever. I'm still freaked out just thinking about it. It all started with a simple swipe right, which honestly, I'm regretting more than that time I tried to dye my hair blue in my bathroom sink. It was like a few weeks ago, maybe a month. Summer was just starting, and I was bored. My friends were all coupled up or out of town, and I was stuck in my small town, working my dead-end summer job at the local grocery store. Swiping on Tinder seemed like a harmless way to pass the time. I wasn't looking for anything serious, just someone to hang out with. Maybe catch a movie or something. Then I saw his profile. His name was, let's call him Ethan, because even thinking about his real name makes my skin crawl. He was cute, not like supermodel gorgeous, but definitely attractive. He had this kind of brooding, intense vibe in his pictures, which I usually avoid like the plague, but for some reason, I was drawn to it. He had a short bio, just said he was into hiking, photography, and exploring abandoned places. Okay, the abandoned places thing was a little weird, but I figured everyone has their quirks. I swiped right. We matched almost instantly, which, looking back, should have been my first red flag. We started chatting, and he seemed pretty normal. He asked me about my interests, my job, my favorite movies. We talked for a couple of days, and he suggested we meet up. I was hesitant at first, but he seemed so eager, and honestly, I was flattered. He suggested this coffee shop in a neighboring town, about a 30-minute drive away. It seemed like a safe enough place, public, lots of people around. I agreed. The coffee shop was in a small, kind of rundown strip mall. It wasn't exactly the most romantic setting, but I wasn't expecting a fairy tale. I got there a few minutes early and ordered a latte. I was nervous, fidgeting with my phone, trying to act casual. Then I saw him walk in. He looked exactly like his pictures, maybe even a little better in person. He smiled when he saw me, and for a split second I thought, okay, maybe this won't be so bad. We talked for a couple of hours. The conversation flowed easily, and he seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. He told me about his photography, showed me some of his pictures on his phone. They were actually pretty good, mostly landscapes and nature shots. But then he started talking about the abandoned places he liked to explore. He described these crumbling buildings, forgotten factories, and overgrown cemeteries with this strange, almost obsessive fascination. It was a little unnerving, but I tried to brush it off. Then he suggested we go for a drive. He said he knew this cool spot just outside of town, an old abandoned mill with a waterfall. He promised it was a great place to take pictures. I hesitated. I wasn't sure if I was ready to go off alone with him, especially to some secluded location. But he was so persuasive, and he kept saying how much I would love it. Plus, I didn't want to seem like I was being paranoid. So, against my better judgment, I agreed. We drove for what felt like forever, down these winding, back roads. The sun was starting to set, and the sky was turning this eerie shade of orange. The landscape became more and more desolate, with overgrown fields and dilapidated farmhouses. I started to get a bad feeling in the pit of my stomach. I asked him how much farther it was, and he just smiled and said, "Almost there." Finally, we pulled up to this dirt road that was barely even visible. He turned off the main road and started driving down it, the car bouncing over the uneven terrain. The trees were thick and overgrown, blocking out most of the remaining sunlight. It was getting dark, and I was starting to panic. I kept telling myself it would be all right, that I was just being dramatic. We reached the end of the road, and there it was, the abandoned mill. It was even more dilapidated than I had imagined. The building was crumbling, with broken windows and graffiti-covered walls. The waterfall was just a trickle of water, barely visible in the fading light. It was a creepy, desolate place, and I immediately regretted coming. He got out of the car and started grabbing his camera equipment. I stayed in the car, clutching my purse, trying to calm myself down. He came around to my door and opened it, smiling. "Come on," he said. "You have to see this." I reluctantly got out of the car and followed him towards the mill. As we got closer, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There were symbols painted on the walls, strange, unfamiliar symbols that looked almost ritualistic. I stopped walking, my heart pounding in my chest. "What are those?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He just laughed. "Oh, those? Just some local artists," he said, trying to sound casual. But I could see the glint in his eyes. The way his smile didn't quite reach them. He started walking towards the mill, and I stayed rooted to the spot. I knew I had to get out of there. Now, I turned around and started running back to the car. He yelled after me, but I didn't stop. I ran as fast as I could, my heart pounding in my ears. I reached the car and fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get them in the ignition. Finally, I managed to start the car and slammed it into reverse, backing out of the dirt road as fast as I could. I didn't stop driving until I reached the main road. I drove straight to the police station and told them everything. They took my statement, but they didn't seem to take me seriously. They said they would check it out, but they couldn't guarantee anything. I went home and deleted Tinder. I didn't sleep for days. I kept having nightmares about the mill, the symbols, and Ethan's creepy smile. I told my friends what happened, and they were horrified. They said I was lucky to get out of there. I don't know what Ethan was planning, but I'm convinced it wasn't anything good. I'm still scared to think about what might have happened if I hadn't run. I haven't been on a dating app since. Honestly, I don't think I ever will be again. Some things are just too terrifying. I still get chills whenever I drive past that exit. I'm just glad I trusted my gut and got the heck out of there. Now I stick to books and my cat. Dating? Nope. Never again. Maybe when I move to a big city. But even then, I think I'm happy being single. This small town has taught me that some people are just plain weird, and it's safer to stay home. Who knows what kind of kooks are out there? I never thought I'd be this person. You know, the one with the totally insane Tinder story that everyone whispers about at parties. The one that makes people clutch their pearls and swear off online dating forever. I always thought I was too normal, too boring, too safe for anything legitimately messed up to happen to me. I mean, my biggest dating app drama before this was probably just getting ghosted after a couple of decent dates. But yeah, life has a funny way of proving you wrong. It all started with a profile that seemed way too good to be true. And honestly, in hindsight, That should have been my first red flag. I was, like, scrolling through Tinder one night, procrastinating on a huge history paper that was due. And I saw him, Liam. His profile picture was this artsy black and white photo of him standing in front of some graffiti wall in what looked like Brooklyn. He had this kind of brooding, intellectual vibe going on, which, I gotta admit, I'm a total sucker for. His bio was short and sweet. Writer, reader, explorer, looking for someone to get lost with. Ugh, so cliche, I know, but it worked on me. I swiped right without even thinking. And then, like, 5 minutes later, boom, match. I was actually surprised. Guys that cute usually don't go for someone like me. I'm pretty average looking, maybe a little on the nerdy side. But whatever, I wasn't going to overthink it. I messaged him something lame like, "Hey, cool graffiti pic." And he messaged back almost immediately. We started talking, and I was hooked. He was smart, funny, and surprisingly down to earth. He told me he was working on a novel, which I thought was super cool, and we bonded over our shared love of old movies and obscure indie bands. We texted for hours every day, and after a week, he asked me out. He suggested meeting at this little, hole-in-the-wall bookstore cafe downtown. It was exactly the kind of place I'd pictured him liking. The atmosphere was cozy, the coffee was strong, and the shelves were overflowing with dusty old books. I was actually really nervous. I spent, like, an hour trying to decide what to wear, finally settling on jeans and a simple sweater. When I got there, he was already waiting for me at a table in the corner. And dude, he was even more attractive in person. He had these intense blue eyes and this disarming smile that made my stomach do flips. We talked for hours that night, about everything and nothing. I felt like I'd known him forever. It was honestly the best first date I'd ever been on. We started seeing each other a lot after that. We went to museums, concerts, and even a couple of weekend trips to the coast. He was always surprising me with thoughtful little gifts and gestures. He'd randomly show up at my dorm with my favorite coffee or leave a handwritten note on my car. It felt like something out of a movie. But then, things started to get weird. Subtle at first, almost unnoticeable. He started asking me really personal questions about my past, things I wasn't really comfortable talking about. He wanted to know about my childhood, my family, my previous relationships. It wasn't just casual conversation. It felt like he was trying to dig something up. He also became increasingly possessive. He didn't like it when I went out with my friend without him, and he would get visibly upset if I talked about other guys. He started calling and texting me constantly, wanting to know where I was and what I was doing. It was like he needed to know everything about me, all the time. One night, we were at his apartment, watching a movie. His place was kind of creepy, to be honest. It was in this old building on the edge of town, and it was filled with antique furniture and weird, unsettling artwork. As the movie was playing, I got up to grab some water, and I noticed a notebook lying on his desk. It was open to a page filled with my name written over and over again in different fonts and handwriting. It was seriously disturbing. When I asked him about it, he just laughed it off and said it was for his novel. He said he was using my name as inspiration for a character. But I didn't believe him. The way he said it, the look in his eyes, it just felt wrong. After that, I started to distance myself from him. I made excuses not to see him, and I stopped responding to his texts as quickly. He didn't take it well. He started showing up at my dorm unannounced, begging me to talk to him. He would call me late at night, leaving long, rambling voicemails. It was getting scary. Then one night, I got a text from him saying he needed to see me. He said it was urgent. I ignored it. A few minutes later, he texted again, this time threatening to hurt himself if I didn't meet him. I panicked. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to be responsible for something terrible happening. I reluctantly agreed to meet him at a park near my dorm. It was late, and the park was deserted. When I got there, he was sitting on a bench, staring at the ground. He looked like he'd been crying. I sat down next to him, and he immediately grabbed my hand. His grip was tight, almost painful. He started telling me how much he loved me and how he couldn't live without me. He said he knew he'd been acting weird, but he promised he would change. I tried to reason with him, to explain that we weren't right for each other, but he wouldn't listen. He just kept talking about his love for me, his obsession with me. That's when I noticed the knife. He had it hidden in his sleeve, and he was slowly sliding it out. I froze. I didn't know what to do. I was completely terrified. He started rambling about how if he couldn't have me, no one could. I was completely lost for words, trying to process everything that was happening. As he was inches away from my face, there was an officer screaming, "Drop the weapon!" He dropped the knife and surrendered. The police took him away, and I never saw him again. I found out later that he had a history of mental illness and had been stalking other women before me. I still have nightmares about that night. I deleted all my dating apps, and I never swiped again after that. It's a story I rarely tell because honestly, who would believe it?